Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining the meeting tonight. Happy New Year and welcome to our first meeting of 2021. I'm Kevin, KK6TCT. This evening we've got a presentation by Glenn Elmore N6GN on the flying antenna, and John Watrous has joined as well, K6PZB. If Glenn has any technical issues with the presentation while he's presenting, then John's going to take over for us. And I have to apologise that I didn't start the meeting recording before the meeting, so I'm just doing a quick voiceover intro to start the meeting before we get to the main presentation. Jojo, our club treasurer, wasn't able to join the meeting tonight, but he did prepare an update on the current treasury and membership report. So I'd just like to summarise that for a month ending of December, we had 5,845.04 in the general fund and 2,364.11 in the repeater fund, for a total of 8,209.15. And then for our current membership report, we have 154 paid members to date, ending month of December, and of those we have 92 that are ARRL members. So as you can see, membership has been increasing slowly month after month, which is awesome, and I'd like to welcome any of our new club members that have joined, and maybe this was the first club meeting that you've just joined with us, or you're watching the meeting recording for the first time. Welcome, and thanks for joining the club. And at this point I hand it over to Carol to give an update on the website and social media. And apologies, Carol, I think I might have chopped off the beginning of your presentation, but at this point I'll hand over and continue the recording of the meeting at this point where we started the recording.
Christmas of the 12-day Christmas tomorrow, so don't put away your trees. I set my tree up. This is a report for our website activity. I want to remind everyone that the URL for our website, n6na.org, and plenty of resources there for all of our club members and also for the greater amateur radio community. There's a page on our website that describes our nets there. We have our Wednesday nets. Well, the daily net, Sunday through Saturday, thanks to Bob and N6PGQ and the group of net controls for that net, 7:30 every night at 145.25 repeater. And that's going strong ever since we have the shelter at home due to the pandemic. Wednesdays are our major nets here, 8 p.m. on 2 meters, of course. We have our main club net. Then we have a 10-meter net at 8:30 p.m. on 28.420 megahertz upper sideband. And all radio amateurs of all licensed classes, of course, can use that frequency, so you're all encouraged to participate. Then our slow scan TV net is at 9 p.m. on the 441.30 megahertz repeater. And we live stream that on YouTube Live. And we've had visitors from all across the country and outside of the country too that have been watching what we're doing on YouTube. So that's educational. We share some interesting pictures there, and all of those nets are also archived up there on our YouTube channel. A reminder that we do have a swap page, and this is a great service for all of our members if you're interested in buying or selling any equipment. And check that. We have a brand new listing there for a Yaesu FT 767 HF rig as well. So welcome to look at that. As far as the activity during December, the total page views pretty much stayed very close to what we had in November, roughly about 73 visits per day. And the most views, of course, were on the day after our last visit. People like to visit us afterwards to check the meeting video, recording of our meeting. The most active web pages, for some reason, 10 meters has a lot of interest right now. And I guess it has to do with the upswing in the solar flux. So we had a lot of hits on 10-meter page, home page, second place, and then the magnetic loop antenna project. That's a project we put together about 10 years ago, and it still gets a lot of interest because it seems to be a popular antenna, compact HF antenna. As far as where our traffic is coming from, a little more than half of it is referred to us through Google searches, and 22% come directly to our URL, n6na.org. Again, most of the visits are from California. And we had some visits from Florida, New York, and also all these other countries that you see on the map there. We get visitors from all over the world. And social media, YouTube channel had a 1,630 views. So we have 273 subscribers. Facebook page has 463 followers. On Twitter, we have 139 followers. And we do have a Discord server with 18 members. And all of our club members are welcome to ask to participate on the Discord server. It's a great place to chat in real time. And if you have any emails that you wish to send to us, you can do that. This is our email address, contact@n6na.org. And these are the URLs for our Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube feeds. So thank you again very much. And I'll turn it back to our president. I'm going to stop share. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Carol. Do we have any other news items or updates from anyone before we move on to our main topic tonight?
You know, you might let Bob Mix talk about his progress with his DIY radio program.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, are you on, Bob?
Sure. Yeah. Thursday night at 7 o'clock, we're going to have our first meeting for our DIY radio project of producing a CW transmitter that puts out less than 1 watt. It was featured in the December QST in an article entitled Tuna Tin S for a synthesized transmitter that fits inside of a tuna tin can. The original one was invented by Doug DeMaw back in 1976, and it was updated in around 2000, and the NorCal Club did one. So guys that have been around doing QRP have heard about it for years, know all about it. But anyway, it was recently updated to add a digital synthesized VFO to the front end of it. So it's half modern, half digital, and then half analog. The analog half is not much more than a transistor that outputs to a bandpass filter to produce a nice clean signal, CW signal, on one of 3 bands. So that's basically the project. We aren't going to build it just the way it was built in the article. We're going to improve it. We're going to take advantage of the master builder, Phil Sittner, who has designed a circuit board that combines the 2 circuit boards in that article into a much better one, and will be able to be built with modern parts. In that article, they have inductors that use little plastic bobbins that are available from only one source that we know of. And it turns out that they aren't available from that source anymore. So we're going to use some toroids. They're going to be simple toroids. I understand some people are afraid of toroids, but they're single winding toroids, very easy to do. And so it's going to be an improved radio. We're in the process of getting that done. Phil has built a prototype, and I've built some prototypical parts myself. So it's still a work in progress. We're not ready to say, here it is, and put a kit together. We're going to be having kits available for like 25 bucks. We haven't really priced it out completely at this point, but I think Phil is leaning towards saying $25 is the price. And it'll be a learning experience for people who haven't done this before. There will be some new things you're going to learn, and I think it'll be a terrific little project. For those of us that have built sophisticated things home-brewed, this one appears to be a simple thing, and it'd be a good introduction to home brewing. So that's basically it. So
Okay, sounds good. All right, and that's Thursday at 7, right?
one more item. Yeah, if you're interested in it, go to groups.io and search on DIY radio, one word, DIY RADIO, and join the group, and you will be then on the email list for bulletins and further status. So, and then you'll get an email. I guess I already sent that out, but I'll resend it saying what the meeting ID and passwords are. So that's the way to start.
Okay,
I'm
and
done.
just to confirm that's Thursday at 7, right?
Thursday at 7, yeah.
Okay. All right, sounds good. All right. Any other updates from anyone for this week?
KL7HUR Neil. I just received from my son on Johnson Space Center Amateur Radio Club a list of space activities that will be happening this year as part of the Happy New Year from them. If there is an interest, I can go over it very quickly. Okay, is there any interest on it?
There are three landings on Mars next month.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. The first thing is 3 missions to Mars. One of them with a helicopter. We have the Twin-1, the Hope probe, and the Perseverance to go there. James Webb Space Telescope supposed to be launching in October. NASA has lots of activities in Boeing Starliner has a test number 2.
Is one of those landings Air Force One?
Not to the best of my knowledge. We may talk to them and put that on the list. I like that one. I expect a lot of first, including the beginning of the building of the Chinese space station is going to start. A first orbital booster reuse outside of SpaceX, that probably from Rocket Lab. First fully private crewed mission to the ISS will be going by SpaceX. They had only partial crew missions so far. The 2 first movies to be made aboard the space station will be done this time. And I have a whole bunch of other things in here which we can share through the emails.
Oh, okay, sounds good. Is that something we could share on the website as well?
Sure. I'll put it together and including this list, I'll do that.
Yeah, okay. All right, sounds good.
Sounds good.
All right.
Okay.
Anything else before we move on to our main topic?
Oh, before we sign off, I want to talk to Carol and Paul about badges, but it doesn't need to be the whole membership. So,
All right, so we can hang on to the end for that.
yeah.
Okay, sounds good. All right. Glenn, if you're ready, we'll hand over to you for our main presentation tonight.
Okay, well, good evening, everybody. Nice to see you all and hear a little bit about my old home state. I'm here. I think you saw my call. I'm in N6GN, and for most of my life and career, I was in Sonoma County, just to the west of you. In the last 3 years, I've been in here. I've moved to Colorado, and I'm about 13 miles south of everybody's favorite WWV. So I have a 7 10 to 30 kilowatt transmitters, pretty close. So that's where I am. And tonight, Carol had asked me, she thought there would be some interest in seeing some of the applications that I've been involved with. Now it's been almost 20 years. And the general topic here, let me share our screen here so you can see if it will, how are you doing? Do we have a screen?
We do.
That's good.
All right. So what I want to talk about tonight are really just a couple of applications associated with a general topic of SWTLs. And for those of you who aren't familiar, an SWTL can either be a surface wave transmission line, or it could be a single wire transmission line. The letters work for that technology has both theoretical and practical applications. And so what I'd like to do tonight is show you a couple of the practical applications. Actually, they're a little old now, but they're amateur radio related. And before I start, I want to caution that if I suddenly go away, it's because Zoom has crashed for me 4 times in the last week. And if that happens, John K6PZB, who you will see in the video, I'm gonna first play. He may be able to step in and take over. But essentially, the what's here, most of what's here is available there at the website, sonic.net tilde my call. And there's quite a lot more, not just the applications I talked about tonight. There's uh, a variety of paper. But although this is a talk about application, I want to start off just with a touch of background of context, because that's kind of necessary to know what the heck it is I'm talking about. And so the first question is, what's an SWTL? What is it? And it's a fundamental transmission line type, a mode of propagation, a waveguide mode along a single, it doesn't have to be a wire, a conductor, a wire works. And in a lot of ways, it's kind of the flip of optical fiber. That is, optical fiber constrains a wave inside a dielectric material. It propagates along with very low loss at light, very short wavelengths. And SWTL is a bit like that, in that it's kind of the reverse. It's a wave that propagates along the outside of a conductor, a single one, not a. You're familiar with coaxial cables and balance feed lines, and some of you may be familiar with hollow wave guides, both rectangular and circular. This is not any of those. So. For one of the articles mentioned on the web page, if you want more practical detail on how you build it, and you perhaps have already seen it, John and I published in 2012 a article in QEX about how to build a SWTL that was practical and useful for amateur uses. But historically, one of the things that happens is a lot of people look at that and they say, "Oh, I think I've heard that before. It's this G-line stuff, isn't it?" And I have to say, it's not. In fact, G-line was a presentation by a man named Gero Gobau in the early 1950s. And he had this idea that he demonstrated that he could propagate a wave along a conductor. And he thought you had to have special conditioning of the wire. You had to wrap it with dielectric. A few years later in QST, George Hatherall, K6LK, put an article in where he showed how to make a surface wave guide, surface wave transmission line, and he used a piece of RG8 or something like that with the outer insulation, the outer conductor off, the shield off, stripped the braid. So you had a fat conductor with a bunch of dielectric. Amazing thing is, everybody thought that Gobau was correct, and that these limitations, which are pretty, it was fairly limiting in what it was good for. If you had to have either special featuring on the wire or a lot of insulation on it, that kind of restricted it. Rather a good performer, but more arcane than anything. So, however, about 20 years ago now, I discovered, and there's patents around, and quite a few articles. If you want to go read more, either theoretical or some more practical applications that I won't talk about tonight unless you push me into it. There's another list here. Again, the sonic.net website has, it's not a very good website, I confess. Carol does a much better job with River Cities, but you should be able to find your way around to some of it. So what I'd like to do tonight is, Zoom permitting, is just show first a presentation that I did, or a video of sorts that I did about 10 years, well, 12 years ago, 10 years ago, I don't know, called the Flying Antenna. Some of you may have already seen it, I don't know. And then I'll follow that with a related amateur application using Whisper on 2 meters that a number of stations in Northern California took involved in. In fact, Carol was one of them. So her call will show up on that too. And then finally, if there's anything else you want to talk about, I want to make this pretty informal. And if there's any questions afterwards, hey, we can go there. So what I'd like to do is start off. If I can find it here, I'm going to start off with that video that I presented called the Flying Antenna, and I have to apologize ahead of time. It's terrible audio. It's got a lot of mains related hum in it. I've never gone back and fixed it or filtered it, but it's about 9 minutes long. So get ready to be whatever bored or whatever with a video here that gives you an idea of an application of this low loss surface wave transmission line for an amateur use. And what happened was that John and I think I better, before I share my screen here, I better tell it to share the audio. John K6PZB, who is also here tonight, sat around and decided it would be fun to try building one of these things. And the video, which I'll now move to, hopefully it will give you an idea of what that was about and how we got there. So if I say share now, I think we're going to have a video. And let me know if the audio works.
We can't see it yet.
Louder?
No, we can't see it yet.
The video's not up.
Video's not sharing.
Yeah, you need more audio?
There's no video.
Oh, hang on. That's interesting. Well, let's try that again. Then I'll try optimizing for sharing video clip and see if that makes any difference. Was audio coming through?
No, not
No.
here.
Aha. Okay. Well, new experiment then. Let's try this. I'll say share. How about now?
There you go. Now we're good.
Okay, let's try that. We'll try to start over a little bit from the beginning. Here's and let me know about the audio level. Bottom, identify our problem. Oh, hang on. That's not what I want. I want to start at the beginning. Radio communications on the direct path between us is completely blocked by a low hill you see at the center of the map, just to the east of John's location. Not only is there a hill, but it's covered with trees and foliage, which are effective absorbers. To make matters worse, John's location is in the shadow of 100+ foot tall eucalyptus trees. The fuzzy reflection paths from mountains to the west are actually how we communicate on VHF and UHF bands. Even though we're not far apart, signals are fairly weak on all amateur bands, though. One morning as we were sitting having coffee together, looking at our paper coffee cups, we had an idea on how to fix the problem. Instead of trying to add bigger antennas or more transmitter power, as is usually done to fix a problem like this, how about if we put an antenna where the signal is, way high above John's location? How about if we made a very lightweight antenna and suspended it with a balloon several hundred feet in the air? From previous work, I already knew how to make a very low-loss transmission line out of a single conductor. This is called a surface wave transmission line. Couldn't we use that to both tether the balloon and to feed an antenna located at the top? After some thought and several iterations, this is the antenna we ended up with. It's an extended disc cone that can operate from 400 megahertz to 20 gigahertz. We made it from metallized paper of the same kind you could buy in an art supply store. The top disc has been extended into a cylinder, and the whole thing weighs about 1 ounce. Because of its shape, we call it the Mercury capsule, after the American spacecraft of that name. The cone portion doubles as what's called a launcher that couples to and from the combination tether and surface wave transmission line, which is hooked to an amateur transceiver down on the ground below. At the ground end, there's another launcher, like the one shown here, upside down. It has a coaxial connection on one end and a connection to the tether or surface wave transmission line at the other. It's also made from the same kind of metallized paper we used for the mercury capsule antenna. Before we show you what actually happened, we'd like to show you what we thought we could expect. This plot shows an RF propagation model prediction of signal levels between stations at various distances. It shows what happens as the antenna of one of the stations goes from a low level, here 7 feet, the line on the bottom in blue, to the 200-foot level, the top of the cluster of lines. At the very top is what would happen if those two stations had completely line of sight separation between their antennas. The left vertical axis is the received signal level in dBm, and the right axis is also the received level, but as displayed on the S meter, the signal strength meter of the particular ICOM 706 Mark II-G transceivers we were using. What we'll be showing you first is what the signal sounded like between two ground-mounted antennas. This strength is much less than that predicted by the model because of the intervening hill that is blocking signals between the two locations. In this photo, you see one of the ground-mounted antennas at about 12 feet above ground level. Identical antennas were used at each end. To let you hear it, we're going to be using a software-defined radio to play back a recording made of the conversation. You'll be seeing a display, which is highlighted in this photo, with 3 dB per horizontal division calibration. Pretty weak. Next we'll show you what happened when we deployed the flying antenna. In this photo you can see the antenna in the center, supported by 3 helium balloons, and below it a special winder for the feed line tether, as well as a safety tether that John had made for this experiment. This photo shows the winder with the bottom launcher and the radio used for the experiment. Here again are the winder and antenna on the west end of the path prior to being launched. In this next recording, you'll hear what it sounded like with the flying antenna at 100 feet above ground level. This is still considerably below the top of the obscuring hill between the two locations.
Shooting to an antenna 100 feet above Drayton, my location, trees approaching last night to my east and between our paths, N6GN, K6P.
In this next clip, John has left the tether out, unwound it, so that the flying antenna is at 150 feet above ground level. This is about 100 feet or so below the top of the hill.
N6GN, K6PZB flying a single wire transmission line to an antenna about 150 feet above on a foggy morning on 432.1 megahertz, and seems to be a little wind picking up, a little bit of south wind picking up. My transmission line is out of the trees still, but just fortunately there's a hole in the trees.
In these final two clips, you're going to hear the result with the antenna at 250 feet above ground level. The first is single sideband, and the second there will be a carrier so you can observe the signal strength.
N6GN, K6PZB, you're 5'9" in Grayton, Charlie Mike 88, November Kilo. We're flying an antenna at almost exactly 250 feet right above my QTH. An antenna supported by a single wire transmission line. N6GN.
As you've seen and heard, there is easily more than 40 dB of signal improvement by using the flying antenna system. In addition, because both the antenna itself and the surface wave transmission line feed line are very broadband, the system is usable over all amateur VHF through microwave band. This combination offers the possibility of some high-rate information services such as internet access and HDTV on amateur bands. Using existing ground-located equipment, the heavy stuff can stay on the ground. This might be useful for amateur radio public services and emergency sorts of operations. Although the surface wave technology shown here is patented.
Well, let me stop it there. That's just the disclaimer that says hams can use it. And it gives you an idea of one of the applications. The second topic that I was going to share that I mentioned using Whisper is related. But for this one, we did this on 2 meters, and it was done in September of 2015. Let me share that screen for you. I think I will here. That look good?
Yeah.
Okay. Several of us had been on VHF Whisper, 2 meter and 70 centimeter Whisper. For those of you, probably most of you are aware of Whisper anyway. It's a narrowband mode. And we decided to do a similar, I decided to do a similar experiment. But one of the nice things about Whisper is it gives nice automated reporting of signal strength and performance. It's a really a good playground for playing with things technical. Here we use a latex balloon. I used a larger single latex balloon, and the antenna, rather than being a vertically polarized disc cone, was a halo I built. It was all pretty lightweight. The launcher in this situation was not integrated with a disc cone as shown with the Mercury capsule and in the video. Here, the antenna is at the bottom. You can kind of see it right. I think I have a cursor. Halo is around the aperture of the launcher. The launcher goes back here, and there's about probably about a 3-foot diameter latex balloon with helium in it. Situation was a little bit different from what we saw in the video, in that I had a spinning rule at the bottom on a tripod pointed up, and I played the feed line, the wire, which is number 28 copper magnet wire. I played that through a modified launcher so that I could just crank the altitude up and down with everything still working. Again, there's dental floss safety tether. You can maybe barely see going over to the it's just over here. That's dental floss. You can maybe catch it right there as it goes over to the side of the house. That's just in case I don't ever want things to get away from you. So here's a picture of the system at altitude at my house in western Santa Rosa. And this, as I said, is a location where we've been running Whisper on 2 meters with ground-mounted antennas around Northern California and Oregon and even Washington State. We can work on Whisper on 2 meters with care. Normally, the antenna, I use a ground-mounted 4-element Yagi. In this case, that's what we're going to compare the system with. Here's a shot of a watt meter while I'm transmitting into the balloon-supported halo. There it is on the Whisper frequency 144.4905, which is the dial frequency for 2 meter Whisper. If you hear a carrier down about 1500 hertz higher than that, it's probably Carol transmitting on 2 meter Whisper. I don't know. There are some other stations over. It could have been, but anyway, that's it gives you a shot that it's a pretty good match. Here is the normal antenna system that I would be using on Whisper: a 2 meter 4-element Yagi and a 5-element, 6-element. I don't know. I've forgotten what it was. Short Yagi for 70 centimeters, and those are only at about 20 or 22 feet just above the gutter a little bit, not too far. Again, in western Santa Rosa, which is pretty well shielded from a lot of places by various coastal foothills, as I'm sure you know. We had 5 stations. On the top of the list here is John in Grayton, who was the closest one at 5 miles due west of it. And we had a station at that time in Ukiah, about 50, a little less than 60 miles north, pretty much north, a little north west. Carroll and 2 others, both between 80 and 90 miles distant. Sacramento, San Jose area, and then a station N6KOG, Steve, in the Central Valley down in Tracy. And so the paths, this is the same path, of course, that the video just showed you to John, and just about 5 miles due east-west with an intervening hill. And here's a shot of Whisper between the 2 antennas. Now, this isn't very interesting because AGC had kicked in. Signals were so strong with Yagi to Yagi. I think John was on a Yagi at that point. And of course, I was with the ground antenna. So the signal reports here look identical, and you really can only hint. This first shot here is the balloon. The second one is ground mounted. The hint that something is different is that there's some mains-related sidebands on the 2-meter signal. They're pretty far down. You wouldn't hear them, but they're there. And the signal has to, in order to see them, you have to have a really strong signal, which the balloon happened to be providing. So the Whisper signal report there is not indicative of how loud it was. It was loud. Here's a station in Ukiah. And here's what happened during the test. You can see the circled area is when the balloon was being used, as opposed to a Yagi on the ground pointed. And there was some potentially less variability. You can see on the left side of the left axis here is dB of signal to noise ratio, and time of day across x-axis on the top. Yeah, the path again is quite obstructed. It's an indirect path. There's mountains. There's by no means is there a line of sight shot from Santa Rosa to Ukiah, unless you're, well, even with a mountain up there, you're not. Here's a shot to Carroll in Citrus Heights, or that area, and you can see there again, there are 2 ridges. There is this is Mount Vaca, and then of course we've got the ridge on the mirror of the coast to the east of, generally to the southeast of Santa Rosa, but those are well above. They're 2,000 to 3,000 feet, and elevations here are more like 100 or something. So these things are both obstructed, scatter kinds of paths, and here again, while the signal was up, there weren't very many spots to show in this example. It wasn't particularly stronger, perhaps more reliable. The 4th station was KI6STW in Milpitas, and you can see down there going down the slot. Now this path is a lot different because there's no hills in the way, or I won't say no, it's not laser light, but it doesn't have this scatter indirect path, which is probably the reason you guys don't work mobiles in Santa Rosa too much. It's possible to do it on sidebound with a good station between Sonoma County and the valley over there. We've done it a lot in the past, but it's not a direct path, and usually it takes some station to do it because you've got mountains in the way. Here, you really start to see the thing play, because here we're now getting out of the absorption loss of the foliage, and there's no mountain that got in the way, that is in the way in both cases. Here it's starting to get up higher, and you're seeing a really big improvement for the whisper transmissions or receptions. Actually, in this case, receiving them. This is receiving the signal on the. No, that's right. I'm sorry. That's STW receiving the whisper signal, the 20 watts we're transmitting. And then finally, the Valley station has some mountains in the way, about the same length path, not quite as obstructed. It's still got, you can see that these are the several 2-meter whisper stations in the Sonoma County. There's Carroll up there, and just happened to be on that day. But there are some hills here. It's not really high. It gets kind of flat as you go across the delta here. But you can see there again, a lot of improvement once you get up out of the foliage clutter, on the order of 20 dB. And again, it's also this really wasn't an apples and apples comparison. Now the comparison was with a 4-element Yagi, and here we have a Halo, which is maybe 2 dBi, compared to a Yagi. So you've got both the forward gain of the Yagi, and the only thing the balloon's got going for it is the elevation. Similar transmit power, less ERP from the balloon. But it does show, as you saw and heard in the video, that you really elevation. That's why we go mountain topping on VHF for contests. At least that's kind of the idea. So what I really those are just the two examples of amateur uses of this low loss transmission line, and that it does have communications possibilities and uses. There's a lot of other things. The theory for it, which I promised I wouldn't talk about tonight, because it is such a fundamental mode, it turns out to have ramifications in things that are both arcane and things that are very common. If you refer to that website, there are there's a link to a new understanding of how even simple dipole antennas work and what the nature of radiation resistance is. It's surprising. This theory, this model involving a surface wave, answers the questions, the same ones the standing interpretation does, which is primarily mathematic rather than, primarily mathematic. And it predicts some things and explains impedance and radiation patterns and some things that aren't quite as intuitively obvious from the standing example. So again, those are there's 3 or 4 QEX articles there, and then more recently there's an RSGB article from Redcom Plus talking about this transmission line and what that says. That it's very interesting that a fundamental mode like this has been missed for so long, but that what it says, what it kind of hints at in things that are fairly deeply physics. So that's about it. I just had those two that I wanted to show. And are there any, you want to talk about anything or any questions?
I have one question, if it meets your criteria.
Oh, sure. I don't know if I can answer, but I'll try.
A signal in a piece of coax, I trust that is the TEM mode.
Mostly. If it's low impedance coax, it's almost all TEM.
Okay, so now we get to this launcher of yours, and now we have a surface wave mode. So the launcher is the magic tool.
The launcher is the
mechanism conversion.
Mm-hmm.
And so here's another piece of it that sounds interesting. Through this piece of coax, you've got a wave traveling at like 66% of the speed of light. Velocity factor, right?
Mm-hmm.
You get to your launcher, that piece of wire is now running at the speed of light.
That's right. Just about.
What caused it to accelerate?
Well, it's the same thing that would happen if you change from a piece of polyethylene dielectric coax to a piece of Teflon to a piece of heliax, which is mostly air. If you look at the TEM mode, and this is a TEM for those that don't know what the heck that means, is usually transverse electric magnetic. It describes, in the case of coax, the standing model for how a coax comes from an equation by Oliver Heaviside in the very early 1900s. And in fact, it was actually him. He was the one that added the whole concept of inductance. They had the undersea cable from England for almost half a century at that point, or probably it was more than a half a century, right around that. After having broken some of the shorter ones. But he came up with a standing equation called the telegrapher's equation, and you perhaps have seen it in the IRRL handbooks. very, very common, that uses an R, an L, a G, and a C to describe what coaxial cable does. And it describes a TEM mode, this mode that we familiarly use. What was surprising was that about 1941, there was a book by Julius Stratton at MIT, in which he looked at the underlying theory of principal modes that were possible on cylindrical things around other cylindrical things. And what he found was there were two. There was a fundamental TEM00 mode, which is what coax is. There was also a TM mode. But in that presentation, that book, and since, nobody seemed to catch on that mode was actually in existence in standard coax. The reason for that's not too surprising. These two modes simultaneously propagate. So when you have a piece of coax, you have two modes present. Only if it's low impedance coax, there is so little in the TM mode that you don't notice it. It gets swept under the rug with other features like skin effect and some things like that. And it isn't until the impedance gets high that you notice. So in the case of a launcher for this SWTL, and it is the mechanism to which makes an efficient transition between power in a transmitter or a source of some kind and power along the line, and vice versa for capturing it again and turning it back into something for the other end. That mechanism, it's really a waveguide adapter, just like any other waveguide adapter. You can go from coax to rectangular waveguide like a radar would. Microwave oven has waveguide in it usually. They have a coax adapter probably coming out of a magnetron. So, you're transiting among various propagation modes. Energy is moving along, and the rate at which it moves is strongly affected by the presence of the medium it travels in. The dielectric in the case of coax, and fundamentally these are limited per paper by a man named Skolnikov. These are limited by the radiation the impedance of free space, the permittivity and permeability of free space. So per him, and this is the RSGB article I mentioned that you can get to from the site, talks about just that if his theory is correct, and you cannot propagate a wave in our universe at an impedance higher than that, something's very wrong by a priori looking at telegrapher's equation, because it permits coax or balanced line. You might buy some balanced line. You say, well, I'll make 300 ohm line. Well, that's okay. But what happens is, in that case, you get high enough, pretty soon you could have, well, why don't I have 2000 ohm line if I have skinny conductors far apart? Well, what happens actually is it turns into bidirectional surface wave lines. So long answer, probably more than you wanted to hear, but the answer is the velocity factor, how fast the wave travels in it, is generally related to the medium in which it travels, either a dielectric or, what might be air. In the case of surface waves, I've actually measured the dielectric constant of air, not very accurately because it's difference of big numbers, but I've actually measured the dielectric constant of air because, it's not really in a vacuum. It's in something still, but it's almost like one. Good question, though.
I have a question.
Yeah.
How did you feed your antenna?
Oh, well, which one?
The very first one.
Right, the disc cone. Let me see if I can. I'm not sure if the picture makes it clear here. Let me see if I can bring it up. I'm not sure I can say it easier than I can show it. I was going to try that. Well, I'm not going to bother with that. Essentially, that antenna, the so-called mercury capsule, had two pieces. It has a launcher, the flared bottom, that was actually the cone of the disc cone, doubling as a launcher. So the surface wave coming up the 28 wire, tiny wire, is looking at at a cone, and this is not a perfect launcher, but it's probably got 2 or 3 dB of mismatch or of loss. You can make better ones, but this one was lightweight and worked. So you've got the wave coming up just like it would up the center of a coax, only you don't need the shield. It's very high impedance. But if you catch it at the top of that cone, so the cone's sitting here, the wire's coming down, it becomes essentially coax. It's a transition to a center and an outer conductor. At that point, I just feed the disc of the disc cone. In this case, it happened to be an extended disc, but never mind that. I feed the disc just like, so there's a feed point. It was natural. So, but there's really 2 parts. There's the launcher part, which is also the cone of a disc cone. You know, when you buy a Radio Shack or anybody's disc cone, they don't usually make them solid. They make them with wires, but the complete form is a solid cone. And in this case, it was metallized paper that was lightweight. So another good question. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Glenn, by the way, for doing this at our request. It's quite a stimulating discussion you have here. And it's got some good applications for possibly people who want to have a higher antenna when they're limited as to how, what they can, what, you know, their physical location. They want to get something that's up in the clear. The launcher, I know it works on a completely different principle, but it almost kind of resembles a microwave horn feed. And
yeah, it does.
And if you imagine that the radio wave is going to be spreading out and over a large angle, and then up top you have a little cone like that, and it's trying to capture it. I know it's not working that way, but just the concept is you're going to lose a lot of that power. I'm just curious, what is the percentage of the power that you capture up at the top at the other launcher?
It's the classic engineering answer. It depends. If you work at it, it's possible to make a very good waveguide transition and have under 1/4 dB of loss.
Wow.
Almost all the power is gained. You can treat a really good launcher, surface wave line to another launcher, you know, coax to coax or something. You can treat that just like you would a piece of really low loss coax or waveguide or any other kind. So that's if. Now, obviously, when we're making balloons and things for amateur use and doing it in the garage, and there's some proprietary stuff here on how you do it well. But when you're doing that, you know, you make compromise. You say, well, hey, I'll throw away 2 dB if it weighs an ounce instead of a pound. I don't have to, boy, all that helium I didn't have to put in the balloon. That's a big deal. And so it does become a lot more amenable to something like pop it out of a backpack. You know, I've got an HT and you're off on the hill somewhere and you can't hit a repeater 100 miles away. You pop this thing and all of a sudden you're full quieting in the repeater with a handheld. And it's that you really can do that. So what if you lose half your power? It's only 3 dB. You're gaining 50 or 60, you know, on a long path. You know, so you can throw it away. To your first point though, you look at it and you think, well, isn't it spreading out? And the answer is no, amazingly. Actually, that was kind of what Gobau thought. He thought, well, it would spread out unless you put a lot of dielectric in there to make it kind of hug the wire. And he has a lot of math in his patents and stuff, but it's to support this. He posited it. He didn't present any evidence. He just said, well, I think this is what happens. Let me see if I can prove it. Only he was wrong. Per him, you can't make it work at low frequencies. You have to have dielectric around it, all these things. In all likelihood, what he was doing was probably just this, the TM mode. I don't know, it almost has to be per the Stratton. But still, it does look like that. You think, well, that's an antenna, isn't it? No, it's a waveguide. And in a waveguide, you know, we tend to think about, in ham radio, you tend to think about current in a conductor, you know, balance line, or, you know, or coax. It's like you got a current going one way and an opposite current going the other way. And, you know, we think that way as opposed to a wave. And fields and waves are both ways of looking at how this stuff works, and neither one. There's some really big elephants in the room here, but as far as either one describing really what electromagnetism is, but now I'm getting too theoretical. So, good question though. Yeah. Anybody else?
Glenn, I have a question. So when
Yeah.
you were putting it up about 150 feet, did you have any problems with wind?
Yes. Oh, yes, definitely. Wind is the nemesis of balloons. It's the boon to kites, and I've done kite supported surface wave, but wind is murder because you don't have anything to save you laterally other than the cosine and angle thing. It's terrible. So the fix for that, and you can find some more stuff on the website. The fix for that is you run the wire up, catch it, and you take one of these W6PQL type 2-meter amplifiers I have around here, run a few hundred watts up and rectify it. Now I've got a few hundred watts of DC, and I have a quadcopter that's electric. So now I power the quadcopter from the ground via, let's say, 500 watts of 2 meters. I got half a horsepower available or something. They don't usually take like a quarter of a horsepower, maybe for a big quadcopter. You power the quadcopter and let it hold the thing up. No helium involved, no balloons, and it can fight the wind. It's got GPS on it. So it sits there within about a 1 meter space. It's an aerostat. It's a skyhook. There's details of this on the website. Pictures of that and pictures of powering various running motors off of an ICOM 706 and things like that. And it turns out, everywhere you do this, there's some loss. You start out with PG&E and whoever in your case, and you generate a 1500 watts of DC and you get a kilowatt of RF and you run that up the line and you lose some on the launchers and you end up with 600 watts and then you rectify it and you end up with 500 watts. So it's in the way that I build things in my garage is I can't do it perfectly, but you can get several hundred watts of DC across a long expanse with very low loss. The line itself doesn't have much loss. It was very low loss. The loss is basically in the launcher. So I think there's some numbers on the website, but we're talking and if you look at the article, the QEX article, you can see a comparison of I've forgotten what links. Well, there's a couple of links, but you can see a comparison of number 28 wire as a surface wave with LMR 400 times microwave coax. And guess who wins? It's not LMR. So I'm just saying the whole difference is the impedance. The current, because it's high impedance, the current's small, and the losses are all copper losses, I squared R. So if you can drop the current, raise the impedance, which is what the line natively does. The line impedance for the surface wave line is 377 ohms. And again, there's pictures of that from papers on the site. If you can do that, all of a sudden, you instead of going, the loss goes to a 50th of what it would be. Very small copper losses. There's no radiation loss from the line itself. And anyway, I'm going on beyond that, but that's one of the fun things. One of the fun applications, an amateur one even. I did a presentation at Pacificon in 2015. Something like any ham can have a 400-foot tower, which is the FAA limit on how high you can fly your quadcopter. At least I think it still is. They're changing the rules, but the idea is do just that. You end up having a quad, and it can fly, 25 to 40 mile an hour wind with its good size, and you power it from the ground to hold your skyhook up. Now you've got this low loss transmission line. It's like having a piece of coax to your top of your tower, only there's no tower there. You still have to build moderately lightweight antennas, but it turns out they don't have to be very big or good. Witness the halo or the disc cone. So what if you've only got 2 dB gain instead of 10? Compared to the wind, there's no contest, So height really helps. You can do a lot of fun things, and I think for amateur emergency and who knows what else, there's some applications that start to make sense. So.
Glenn, I've got one other question.
Yeah.
You just mentioned that something that I've been talking about for a while. Coax, if you look at the information, the data on coax, losses are always in dB per 100 feet or dB per 100 meters. And I'm thinking to myself, shouldn't I²R losses come into that equation as well?
Yes, they do. In fact, if you look at the same telegrapher's equation, if you just go pick up a handbook and you'll find this equation for the propagation in coax. It relates, they spend most of the time with charts showing how much RG58 is compared to RGA, but that comes out of this telegrapher's equation, which has the two lossy elements within coax in that model, that TEM model, are the series resistance of the conductor and any shunt conductance of the dielectric. If you've got water in your dielectric, you know what happens. It gets lossy, and that loss is not I²R in the line. It's loss in the dielectric.
Right.
So if you look at that equation, though, what you get a term alpha, e to the minus alpha beta L. That term is essentially attenuation per unit length. It's not dB per 100 feet. It's actually not even in dB. It's in nepers, which nobody ever thinks of. It's about 8 dB. So it absolutely does. So the I², and if you take a piece of, and you look at a, take the center conductor of a piece of coax, most of the loss in the coax we use is in fact the center conductor. It's not the outer. It's a lot fatter. There's lower resistance. It's not, it can be the dielectric in some situations, certainly if it's wet, but for good clean Teflon or even polyfoam or something that's mostly air like Heliax, there's not much, the loss is all I²R in that center conductor. So
So what that means is, as you increase power, you're having increasing in losses.
Of course,
because you're running more current.
Of course. If you have 1 dB loss in the coax, then you run a kilowatt instead of 100 watts. Guess what? That's 10 times the power. Still 1 dB loss, but it's 10 times. The coax gets hotter. What we expect.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Okay. Have a look at the page and write me if you have any questions or want to. I'd be glad to, or we can chat. Zoom held up the whole time, so I probably can do it again.
It did well. Thanks, Glenn. That's fascinating. Thanks.
Sure thing.
Do you have any other last minute questions before we wrap up? No, I think so. All right. Well, thanks for doing the presentation tonight, Glenn. That was awesome. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
All right.
Thanks, Glenn.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.